Yeah. So today, we're going to go over the last two schools that Mitch Horowitz talks about. He talks about four general positive thinking schools in his book, One Simple Idea, which is the book we've been covering in this pop up course. And we went over I would say, the two most popular schools last video. Those two schools being first, probably the most popular, the Magical Thinking or Divine Thought school, and the second school being the Conditioning or Reprogramming school. The first school is the Magical Thinking or Divine Thought school is what we usually think of when we use the term law of attraction or law of assumption. Teachers like Neville, Joseph Murphy, books like The Secret, even, people like Norman Vincent Peale, they all fall under that divine thought, magical thinking school. The conditioning or reprogramming school is more when we're using more psychological sounding language without the spiritual undertones. People like Emile Coué, Maxwell Maltz fall under that school, according to Mitch, in these general, school analogy that he's making here. And again, these there's cross sections to these various schools. There's different ways of integrating all parts of different parts of different schools into your own personal application of these manifesting and law of attraction ideas. But this is, a general overview of the four main schools that Mitch identified. Today we're going to go over the last two schools. There is some tree cutting going on, so we'll see how long this car video goes for. And these last two schools are not as popular by any means as the first two. However, they're worth going over, so I'm going to briefly go over them. The third school that Mitch talks about is called the Conversion School. And Mitch writes in One Simple Idea. And again, the playlist for all of this pop-up course can be found above. All right, check out the course if you haven't already watched all the videos. The Conversion School, Mitch writes, philosopher William James and psychologist Carl Jung shared a key idea that a conversion experience or religious awakening could objectively alter the circumstances of a person's life. Right? This is something we also see often. People have a quote-unquote spiritual awakening. That's like a term that's so overused these days. But nonetheless, there's real truth to it, where people have an awakening and it changes their life. Mitchell a bit later says, the Conversion School sees man as a psycho-spiritual being who is capable of experiencing dramatic, visible life changes through a consuming experience of faith, which reorders a person's priorities and perspective. Conversion, wrote Bill Wilson, who was the founder of AA, does alter motivation and does semi-automatically enable a person to be and to do the formerly impossible. So many of you watching this channel have had experiences like this, like profound shifts in your life, which we would generally call like a spiritual epiphany or awakening, which dramatically alters us. And it often dramatically alters us like right away. Like we look at the world differently. And by looking at the world differently, almost inevitably, our life externally becomes different over time, right? So this is another school or way of looking at these ideas and approaching these ideas. Mitch then goes on to make these great points about this. Conversion experiences, while obviously not limited to the positive thinking movement, help explain New Thought's ability to attract newcomers, some of whom earnestly testify to personal breakthroughs upon discovering its ideas. For individuals who have been raised within uninspiring or punitive religious backgrounds, the self-affirming beliefs of mind power can generate tremendous enthusiasm and reorientation. The problem is in sustaining that experience. For individuals with a defined and well-ordered aim, such as staying sober, Support groups such as AA do provide a sustaining structure. But most people discover positive thinking philosophy through books such as The Secret or The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And their initial excitement, along with the self-validation they may experience, is not generally sustainable. Hence, positive thinking bestsellers and seminars can attract droves of excited newcomers, but the movement is like a great revolving door through which the curious quickly come and go. So, this book is so fucking good. Yeah, I mean, Mitch just summed up a huge issue in this positive thinking, law of attraction space. There's tremendous value here, as we always talk about. What we are interested primarily in exploring on this channel is how to gratifyingly and sustainably utilize this wonderful information for the long run in our life. However, what happens for most people, and what's hugely under-discussed because it's not sexy and it's not marketable, but it is the truth, is that most people get into these ideas and they feel perhaps a huge surge of excitement and they see change in their lives by finding out about this secret or reading The Power of Your Subconscious Mind or discovering Neville or discovering Abraham Hicks. But they are unable to sustain the initial excitement. Again, to quote Mitch, and their initial excitement, along with the self-validation they may experience, is not generally sustainable. Hence, positive thinking bestsellers and seminars can attract droves of excited newcomers, but the movement is like a great revolving door through which the curious quickly come and go. That's a huge percentage of what we see online on social media in regards to this stuff. Before I became more aware of the social media scene, I thought more people were genuinely interested in these ideas over the long run, in cultivating a relationship with these ideas, in implementing and integrating them into their life over the long run, for the rest of their life. I got into these ideas in my early 30s, and I'm 43 now, and at no point have I seriously considered dropping these ideas from my life completely, because they've always been so interesting to integrate directly into my life in whatever way I could. Even when I can only integrate them in a small way, the information was fascinating enough and persuasive enough to keep me interested, to keep me going with it. However, I'm a freak in that way. Most people, I realize, more so than I thought, do not do that. Many of you watching this channel do that. But it can be difficult to sustain because the initial excitement and directions we hear are often not enough. And the teachers, even the good teachers, the information they provide is often not enough. For instance, for me, probably the moment when I was closest to dropping this whole manifesting thing, and just being like, these ideas are really interesting, but I've gotten what I can out of them and I'm going to drop them and not basically look at them anymore. The closest I got to that was in 2016. After I had, been exposed to most of the teachers that I'm still really into, like Neville, Joseph Murphy, Richard Dotz, Florence Scovel Shinn. And I'd written those books about Neville. Relax More, Try Less, Mindful Manifestation, Manifestation Through Relaxation, right? If you read those books, you'll see like what I was talking about then is not that different than what I talk about now. But even after that, a couple years into my exploration of these law of attraction type of ideas, I was like, I don't know if I'm getting anything that's substantive out of it that I haven't already learned from them. And it was like a dark night of the soul moment in terms of understanding these principles for me. And what happened is during that brief period, I discovered Kuwei. And that was the turning point for me. All these ideas that seemed esoteric and didn't make enough sense for me at that point to feel like I could sustainably apply them, because I didn't understand what they were pointing at enough. They didn't make enough practical sense, as fascinating as they were and as effective as they were seemingly at times for me. It was only at that point where I had almost given up, and I was just looking for like information, like maybe hypnosis would help me, help me feel more relaxed in general. Because as you know, I'm always talking about how can I feel more relaxed, more at peace in my day-to-day life. It was only indirectly by looking for hypnosis and finding Kuwei, a name I had heard, but had never really looked at his stuff with any sincerity, that I got completely into these ideas for the long run. That was in 2016. And most people don't get that. They aren't fortunate enough or whatever to have an experience like that. You need to ground yourself in these principles in order to feel fulfilled by them in any way. And if you do ground yourself in them, you don't really care about what you see, what other people are doing, and what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, because you know that comparing yourself to other people is only useful to a certain point. And it's useful to some degree to give you an idea of what you're doing and where you're at. But generally speaking, comparisons are odious, right? I forget who says that. That's some famous line. I never was swayed by what, I see people talking about like on social media. Oh, I did this, or this person can do this, or you can't do this, or whatever. Because I've made it my own. And I know these ideas work. And that's what I like sharing with people, is that you can make it your own as well. And you can just utilize this information however it makes the most sense to you, right? And frankly, that's what I can help you do that I don't think many people can help you do. Because most people are smitten with a certain teacher or a certain approach and da-da-da. Fuck all that. There's no approach that works for everybody, obviously. You've got to be more sober-minded about this stuff. We do that, we can integrate this into our life in a more fulfilling way for the rest of our life. Let's talk about the fourth school Mitch goes over. That's the meaning-based school. So we have the four schools again, to just quickly go over them. There's the magical thinking or divine thought school, according to Mitch. There's the conditioning or reprogramming school. There's the conversion school. And then there's the meaning-based school. The meaning-based school, Mitch writes, this approach is found within the spiritual ideas of Rabbi Joshua Loth Liebman and the existential philosophy of psychologists such as Erich Fromm and Viktor Frankl. Frankl, writing after he survived Auschwitz, drew upon his wartime experiences to reach stark conclusions about the depths of human indecency, but also about the very real possibilities of an inner grace appearing from within a person, even under the most horrific conditions. Frankl and his contemporaries saw man as a being of great potential, but one who is trapped in a state of psychical slumber. In a crisis, Frankl reasoned, man can awaken to his higher self. The key is to locate some meaning in life, to find personal terms in which suffering or travails amount to some worth in the world. This revelation can dramatically alter a person's viewpoint and provide new possibilities. Mitch later on says, the essential point of the meaning-based school is that a higher perspective can rescue a person from an existence of aimlessness and undefined anxiety. And later on he says, it can be objected that the meaning-based school is not a mind power or positive thinking philosophy at all. Yet this outlook positioned the agency of the mind as a misunderstood and extremely potent instrument. And through the mind's proper use and powers of perception, a person's way of life could be radically altered, even if outer circumstances remained static. This is probably the most morally and spiritually convincing philosophy to emerge from the mind power tradition. So that's very interesting. Mitch, who, again, takes this stuff more seriously from a historical perspective than just about anybody. And this book is pretty much, that I know of at least, like the definitive book that talks about these law of attraction ideas in a sober historical context. It's very interesting that Mitch, someone who, is very much into and a huge proponent of people like Neville and Coué, Maxwell Maltz. So, of these more mainstream schools, right? Mitch, he believes in the power of the magical thinking or divine thought school and the conditioning reprogramming school. And, he sees the value, obviously, of the conversion school. It's interesting that he says that this meaning-based school is in many ways the most morally and spiritually convincing philosophy to emerge from this mind power or positive thinking tradition. It's something to consider. And, something that I always like to talk about on this channel, and just, I think, again, that links a lot of these ideas with other forms of deep spirituality, is this idea that, again, to quote Mitch, this outlook positioned the agency of the mind as a misunderstood and extremely potent instrument. And through the mind's proper use and powers of perception, a person's way of life could be radically altered, even if outer circumstances remain static. In other words, if we can figure out a way to feel more fulfilled and inwardly relaxed in our day-to-day normal life, even if our outer world doesn't change dramatically and we don't manifest things externally that are dramatically different and we just feel better internally, that's a huge, huge success. And that's something, again, we do not hear enough people speaking about in this space. Who the fuck is talking about that with any consistency? Let's get real about this shit. It's unbelievable how few people talk about this. Instead, it's all just fucking spiritual bypassing. Papa Bear Tim's getting amped now. This is becoming a long video. I'm getting amped. We're going to keep on going. This might be the end of the course here. The tree cutters haven't started cutting yet. If they start cutting when this video is about to end, that would be just perfect. So those are the 4 schools. Mitch continues. The next section is about positive thinking BS, quote unquote. Obviously, Mitch and myself both don't think this is positive thinking BS. We believe in this stuff. I want to just read a little bit from this section. Mitch says, for all these different approaches and for all their influence across varying fields, the positive thinking philosophy is taken seriously almost nowhere in mainstream culture today. Even some of the most famous exponents of motivational thought seem to flee from the association. Without irony, life coach Tony Robbins insisted on television in 2010 that his motivational advice wasn't positive thinking BS. The poor reputation of positive thinking and new thought is not necessarily due to its perceived lapses in realism. Every religious movement begins with supernatural claims, and if any faith were evaluated solely in terms of demonstrable, quantifiable facts, none would pass. Movements of a similar vintage to New Thought, such as Mormonism and Seventh-day Adventism, have gained acceptance. Rather, New Thought's historical dilemma, as previously explored, is in its insistence on embracing a single, all-encompassing theory of life, which is to say, the law of attraction. This is what keeps New Thought's claims from attaining greater acknowledgement and perpetuates its inability to come to terms with evil in other crises. The idea of a mental super law binds New Thought to a paradigm of extremist self-responsibility which cannot be defended to its limits. Holy fucking shit, this is a good book. This is it. Are you listening? I know that a lot of you listening understand what Mitch is saying here. This should be like, hallelujah. He's preaching to the choir here. This is it. And this is why all this is fucked up. It's because people aren't acknowledging, soberly looking at this the way Mitch is talking about here. He continues, while the mind does possess influences that are not yet fully understood and that are palpably felt by many people. The wish to depict the universe as the ultimate result of mentality contradicts our overwhelming experience of living under mechanics, chance, and physical limitations. As the body of Christ was pierced on the cross, there is no spiritual, ethical, or physical imperative in religious literature or in the experience of daily existence to suggest that even the self-aware person, mystic or saint, is immune from such effects. Until this fatal mistake, this reliance on a single metaphysical law of cause and effect, is corrected, the positive thinking movement and its offshoots will continue to seem theologically and ethically unserious. While its literature may survive and even thrive, there are already signs that the movement is unable to maintain a flourishing and long-term congregational culture. So fucking good. So good. Tell people about this course and tell people about this book. Or post it on social media. You know, when you're in these fucking Neville subreddits or Abraham Hicks, you know, conversation rooms, and people are fleecing you and saying, oh, just pay $9.99 and learn how to manifest whatever you want. Manifest whatever you want in 3 weeks. I'm going to teach you how to manifest your SP in 3 days. Fuck that shit. Let's get real. When we get real to get real. And we are free and cool right now. None of this bullshit. Fulfillment right now. Recognizing deep truth right now. That's what this stuff is pointing at. A little bit later on in this amazing chapter, Mitch just says, you know, talking about this again, because again, people don't take this stuff seriously for a lot of the reasons that Mitch mentioned. And Mitch makes this great point. We talked about this many times before too. You know, talking about placebo and Coué and what Coué discovered, and then how, like, you know, the placebo is exploited by the medical corporation, you know, the medical establishment sometimes, and for good and bad, the placebo can be used, right? Mitch writes, some medical authorities might privately nod in sympathy with the defense of Mesmer, the great hypnotist, by Charles de Salon, the 18th century Paris physician. He said, it may indeed be entirely imagination. And if it is, then imagination is a force as potent as it is little understood. Let us work with this mysterious imagination. Let us use it to cure. Let us learn more about it. Right? That's what we're always talking about. Right? And why Neville should be so much bigger than he is. Why Coué should be so much bigger than he is. And I know Neville is big, but not in a serious way. We should explore this mysterious imagination, right? Mitch says, or as it was put to Benjamin Franklin's committee by a patient of Mesmer's, you know, because they were trying Mesmer for his dark magic. the patient said, if it is to an illusion that I owe the health which I believe that I enjoy, I humbly beg the scholars who are seeing so clearly not to destroy it. Let them enlighten the universe, but let them leave me to my error, and let them allow to my simplicity, to my weakness, and to my ignorance the use of an invisible force which does not exist, but which heals me. Powerful quote. And a lot of what Coué talks about, and Coué's experiences and success working with peasants, speaks to that as well. You know, and then Mitch talks about how you don't want to mislead a patient, but, you know, at the same time, obviously the placebo is something that's valid, and it's crazy not to talk about it like it's not. And then, you know, at the end of the book, we're going to finish this book, guys, this pop-up course on this book right now. At the end of the book, Mitch sums it up well. He says, the act of questioning, probing, and affirming the fullness of our possibilities can avert the psychological pain of feeling that we haven't faced life as we should, which is actually the chief cause of shame and anger. The wish to authentically search for the self and its true aims is, perhaps, the greatest form of mental affirmation to which a person can aspire, and the one that brings the most help. The pioneers of the positive thinking movement, acting with deep practical intent, probed the possibilities and capacities of our psyches earlier than any scientists, theologians, or psychologists of the modern industrialized age. The founders of New Thought and affirmative thinking created a fresh means of viewing life, one that was rough and incomplete, rife with mistakes and dead ends, but also filled with possibility and practical application. These pioneers, whose work commenced only in the latter half of the 19th century, began an extraordinary conversation and experiment about the power of thought to shape the experience of the individual. There exists an authentic and efficient beginning, FFH, just I can never say that. There exists an authentic and efficient beginning in their ideas, which remains relatively new. In that sense, the positive thinking movement created the genuine and still unfolding reformation of the modern search for meaning for which William James had hoped. So there you go. Positive thinking, New Thought, hugely helpful, practical, and wonderful, and totally disregarded for most people. Mitch explains in this book why it's so wonderful and also why it's so disregarded by the mainstream. Please read One Simple Idea if you have not already. I really recommend it. And watch the rest of this pop-up course if you have not. If you want help, if you want to get deep with these ideas and really integrate them into your life in the way we were talking about in this video and in this course, I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com. Thank you for watching, and enjoy.